former founder of a tech company back before the Me Too movement. And being a female in tech, I think then was quite different. I had my own mental health challenges, a lot of them that helped me found an organization, give me lots of energy, lots of creative ideas, but there were a lot of ups and downs. And there was a pretty critical point about a year into the startup at an event where I was violently assaulted. And no support from the founders of that organization, from my founders, from the police. I was just told to really, suck it up and keep going. And it kind of all got bad from there. So fast forward 2 years after that, ended up in the psych ward with a critical mental health challenge. And here I am 3.5 years later, thriving, got my master's, working full time. So it's been a journey, but you can do it, and it's possible to seek help and get back on your feet and be better than ever. So that's a little bit about me and why I'm here moderating this conversation, but enough about me. I would love to introduce you to our other two panelists, Steven and Brendan or Brenda. Can you introduce yourselves to the group, please?
Sure, I can go first. Hi, my name is Brendan, or as Bojana mentioned, some folks call me Brenda, just a nickname. My pronouns are they, them, and I work at Shopify as well as doing digital volunteering stuff. So I've been at Shopify for 9 months, so kind of new into the tech space, but a lifetime of experience with mental health to share some vulnerability as well. I live with an anxiety disorder and ADHD, which presents a lot of unique circumstances for working in a digital space from home. Yeah, we'll talk a lot more about it as we go, but a fun fact about myself is I have a cat. His name is Mitz. He doesn't really know his name, but he's actually my roommate's cat, but I would still die for him.
Hopefully he makes an appearance.
He's locked out of the room just for maybe in the future.
Next time.
Yeah, next time.
For that introduction. Steven, you next, please.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you very much. Oh my goodness, the things. I take on too much and always have. So where that took me is I went into investment banking, which is a famously low stress job. Of course, I'm kidding. Super fun, super long hours, learned a whole bunch. I earned my chartered financial analyst designation. That was hard and fun. And then I thought, what's harder than that? And what's harder than that is starting a company. So we jumped into that. That's been fun too. My experience with mental health is largely around just experiencing anxiety. It's been a real exciting time. I started counseling just the right time. So January 2020, I started that. It was obviously super great to at least have the first name of my counselor before COVID hit. And it's been, I would say, very, very valuable, especially the last 18 months here. So, and a fun fact, I like to write jokes. Sometimes the jokes are funny. A lot of them are funny to me in hindsight, but in the moment, everything you write feels terrible.
Well, we'll let you know how they land today. How about that? Awesome. Thanks for the introductions. The next question we've all kind of touched on, but if we really, start to talk about definitions and how unique the concept of mental health is, what does mental health mean to you?
I can go first again. Consistency wins the pageant. So mental health is definitely, I think it means something different to everyone. And that's the beautiful part of it. For myself, it's been like just recognizing where I'm showing up for myself, and even when I don't want to. So whether that's like going for a walk and trying to be mindful in the moment, enjoying nature, or if it's like recognizing that while I'm doing my dishes, that's an act of service if you want to frame things in love languages. I like to do that for self-love. So like acts of service or gift giving or whatever. So being able to recognize that has helped me a lot. And then mental health, like a lot of people just think it's going to therapy or something, but it looks very different. Or it can present itself in many different ways, like setting boundaries. So acknowledging how much you have to give and then knowing when you're at your limit and not going past it. So for example, I said yes to this, and then I had a few other opportunities come up, and then I was like, this is enough. So I turned down another cool event, and there will be more cool events in the future, and I'll be more well rested for those. So there's always going to be more opportunities. And then the biggest lesson I've had has been in looking at my actions and all of my past through a context-informed lens. In like a therapy setting, you would say trauma-informed lens, but I like to say context-informed, just for daily life. So what that looks like is just recognizing that things that were quote unquote weird in high school and stuff made a lot of sense when I recognized that I was living with an undiagnosed anxiety disorder and undiagnosed ADHD. And when I would share that with folks, like my experiences, like I remember we had a presenter come through and talk about social anxiety disorder and the spotlight effect, where when things like right now where you're everyone's focusing their attention on you, I'm like, oh my God. But like in the past, I remember being like, that's relatable and that feels like me. And I would share that with someone and they would say, no, like you don't experience that. So it took a long time to get a diagnosis and to feel heard, but viewing my current life and then my past and my future in the form of like recognizing my actions are lived through my experiences, then it allows me to be a lot more compassionate about about everything. And like, even if I have made any mistakes or anything, or if I'm overthinking, it allows me to like really be okay with it and still feel love for myself after everything. Yeah. I have more to say, but maybe I'll pass it over to Steven.
Oh,
Yeah.
so follow. Really, really good stuff. And I have to say, I really love that piece on, like acts of service or love languages for yourself. I think I've heard about the idea of sort of, dating yourself and just being good to yourself the same way that you'd be good to your partner. It's cool to think that you can give back to yourself and sort of give yourself that permission. So cool. But yeah, so the kind of direct question and my little notes on that, I was mostly like, what stood out to me, I think it was Brene Brown, the person who's the big vulnerability researcher, or shame researcher. They kind of live in the same room though, yeah. Shame and vulnerability. But she talks about kind of listening to your body and starting to recognize, like, instead of like, oh, like I'm starting to get tired, I better drink coffee to like force myself to work harder. It's like, oh, wait a minute, like my body's telling me that it needs to rest. Maybe I will give it what it needs and then like recover and just start earlier tomorrow, or just push a deadline because it's going to be okay. So I kind of think of it that way in terms of what is mental health, is just kind of like listening to your body. And responding in kind with little things. Again, I'm keeping that thing on love languages, like responding with the appropriate kind of love language or appropriate action there.
Yeah, I love what both of you have said. I want to summarize, for the group, but I'd love the attendees, if you could put in the chat, what does mental health mean to you? Would love to hear from the group, what resonated, what maybe wasn't said. Thank you both for your vulnerability right off the bat. It's so nice to hear that, and just to know that this is a space where we can discuss those things. And I was hearing boundaries, I was hearing loving yourself, and really like understanding the evolution that we all go under, and the different contexts, if you will, that, we show up in, and that opportunity to reframe always, right? And as you go through the journey, just to continue to allow yourself that. And when we talk about mental health, particularly in tech, I have my own experience, having, again, been a woman 6 years ago in Toronto, where you were kind of the only one in the room. And I think things have changed a lot since then. But I can only speak from my experience. So, Steven, maybe I'll have you kick this one off. What does it mean to you in the tech industry?
That's a neat one. So for me, again, I come from more of the like investment banking background. So like we had our own sort of challenges in that world. I think tech is obviously unique because the scale of it is great. So if you push something to production and it's on a live site and the site goes down, that's very significant. And we've seen that with things like I think there was a hacker, an outage that took down like things like Amazon, like even the big ones. So I think the scale is great, and I think we can sometimes take that on ourselves. But my particular story is really cool. So as a person who's experienced anxiety and then sort of started to understand some of the language around that and how to cope with that, I've gotten the opportunity to work with folks when they are experiencing one of the most frustrating things in their life, which is finding work. It's usually like the third most stressful thing that happens in your life. And it's been really cool to do what little I can to sort of support that. One thing in particular that I like, I'm a nervous interviewer. I always have been. When I was first asked at Save On, like, tell me about yourself. I was like, I'm like this old, I'm from this area. I'm like, I don't know if I'll get married. And they were like, that's great. That's cool. That's probably enough. And I was like, cool. Yeah. Like just sweating. So super, super fun. But that's how I've interviewed and sort of how I feel during interviews is that spotlight effect. So taking some time to sort of sit with folks and just help them to sort of calm themselves before an interview, recognize like, you only got an hour. It's going to go by really fast. And if you just talk about stories that they are interested in, they're going to really love everything you say. So that's been my own little piece within the tech specific world.
So interesting. So you kind of took your own lived experience and now you use that to help others. And I think we can all say we're all nervous in interviews. So
Yes.
it's great to see you be able to take that tough thing and turn it into a really positive light. Brendan, looking at you, what does it mean for you in the tech industry?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I'm a bit newer to the tech space, but I do work in support. So I work at Shopify and I support business owners. So folks that use our product are real merchants living real business or working in managing a real business, and there's real money involved. And we are also in the middle of a pandemic. So supporting business owners through a pandemic has been it's been very rewarding and I love my job, but it's also very challenging. Empathy fatigue is definitely a big part. And it's hard to sometimes separate the work. I guess balance the work in my life too, as I do really care about everyone that comes through, and working overtime sometimes like can help certain business owners get an answer quicker, which naturally is hard to resist sometimes. So that's been particularly interesting, but trying to recognize that it's all about boundaries, and me setting a boundary in that my time is my own time allows me to show up better each day to help the next person. So big picture, I have to think, or it's easy to get caught up in the moment or in the specific interaction. And for me, it's been very important to keep the big picture front of mind as well. So I have like the company values on my whiteboard up there that I try to refer to and look at before I start the day, just to remind myself, like, am I living to these values? Are my actions living up to these values? So that's been really helpful. And other than that, like I work in onboarding as well. So I help folks who are starting out in support in my role, and I'll get them for about 2 weeks, and half my day I'm spending with them and facilitating a lesson every day, as well as watching them while they take their first interactions and everything and give feedback in the moment. Naturally, as Steven mentioned, it's very nerve-wracking when you're in an interview, or onboarding to a new role, doing something for the first time is always nerve-wracking, no matter how experienced you are in whatever industry you're working in. So a lot of the time people will get super anxious, and trying to coach them through that in turn also can be a lot sometimes. So it's interesting to try and manage boundaries there, but being able to speak and share from my experience and be vulnerable and share how I felt when I was in their position, when I was just starting and going through training, and that's been very impactful and allows to have that relatedness with each other, and let them know that they will be fine and like they're going to continue to grow every day. And focusing, I try to remind everyone to reflect on where they were a month ago and how much growth they've seen in that time. And even like when you're first starting, like a few days can be huge for your nerves and experience. So that's been really cool too, just to remind people to think more big picture.
Wow. Well, we've got two awesome leaders here sharing their experiences. And Brendan, if I can, hopefully it's okay to dig a little bit deeper with you, but, you mentioned they, their pronouns, being in customer service, the emotional labor of it. How does that play into your day?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I am new to they, them pronouns. I came out as non-binary like a few months ago. It was a process, like lots of shame, lots of unpacking, lots of therapy. And then just one day in the shower, I was like, I'm going to do it. So I came out to my family, my friends, and my workplace all in the same weekend. And it's been awesome. Everyone was super accepting. It's kind of like the best case scenario. I'm really privileged and fortunate, so counting my blessings there, as I know it's not the same for everyone else. And in support, it's interesting because for customers, obviously they're going to go to he, him. And I don't tend to like correct or indicate my pronouns, as me being open about my pronouns with certain people isn't always going to create a safe space for me. So it's interesting. I don't know if it would be the same for everyone. So definitely what I'm saying is just my own personal experience. But for me, I will share that openly with peers and in spaces like this. But in places where, I'm doing more customer service, merchant facing things, then I'll let it be. So for that is interesting. I just separate it, I guess, in my mind, and it doesn't affect me as much when merchants say he, him, or anything. It's something that I accept, but I will stand up for and like correct people when I have the capacity to, and I don't always have the capacity to, and in those times I don't always reach out. But again, thinking more big picture, I've been involved with, it's Pride Month, so happy Pride to anyone who identifies as not or queer in some regard. I see you. And I've been working with our Pride team to do education on pronouns, and I shared with my team, and my team has all changed their Slack profiles to include their pronouns in their names. So that feels really awesome and makes me feel very supported. And there's still lots of room to grow for everyone, myself included, but it's been very promising, and just trying to think more big picture and recognize when I have the capacity to engage and correct and when I don't as much.
Wow. Thank you for, letting me go there and for sharing with the group. I think that's, it's so top of mind right now in workplaces, right? And how do we broach that topic? And I was curious because you do have that merchant facing side. So it's really, I think, important to remind us that like not black or white, just like gender necessarily, right? So you can make those well-informed decisions based on yourself and your preferences. And Steven, I was hoping maybe, as someone who interviews and meets people for the first time and knowing that pronouns are, increasingly becoming important to people in the workplace, any thoughts on that and how you view it?
Just try and honor whatever they're bringing, I think. That, and then I work with a guy whose name is spelled Qaid, and pronouncing that is hard for lots of people the first time, and it's very common that they don't get it right, even with time. So I try to be conscious of, if I don't know a name, you can Google it, howtopronouncenames.com. It's super helpful. So don't always nail it, but for a lot of the interviews, especially the first year, I just like exposed to names from everywhere that I didn't know, and try and do that. As far as pronouns go, it's easy. You just kind of talk about and list yours where you can, and I think that creates a little bit more safety. If that person's kind of in that space where, that's a thing they're going to chat about.
Yeah.
I also just want to jump in and jump off that if you're ever like unsure of what someone's pronouns are, you can always remind them like, hey, I just want to check in, like my pronouns are so-and-so, like True. I'm wondering like, how would you like me to refer to you? And also important to know that some people may not be ready to share that with you, and you have to accept that as well. So just be mindful of the context when you're entering the conversation, because for some folks, they may not be out in certain spaces. Discrimination exists, so you have to respect that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Steven.
Oh, I said love that. That's a great note. Yeah,
Same.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, what is the biggest lesson, if you could boil it down, that you've learned so far in your journey with mental health?
I gotta check my notes for that one.
I can start if we want.
Sure.
Cool. My biggest lesson, Steven mentioned it earlier with the coffee thing, but just to listen to my body. At the beginning of the pandemic, we're going to get vulnerable here. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was in a different position. I was surveying at the time, and I was having such bad anxiety that I had ended up in the hospital a few times thinking I was having a heart attack. I wasn't, but it did feel like that. So it turns out panic attacks can present like heart attack symptoms, and it's scary. So I ended up getting to a point where I recognized how much anxiety I was having, and that led me to stop drinking and self-treating or self-medicating my anxiety, and led to me starting on medication. So the reason I went sober wasn't because I really wanted to. It was because my doctor said they wouldn't prescribe me anything without going sober, and I did it out of spite. I was like, I'm going to show you I'm still anxious, I'm still depressed. And I was, but I did feel better. So that was interesting. I did end up going on medication, which really changed my life, allowed me to listen to my body more and make space to go to therapy and do all of these things that were good for my body. And it was challenging, and definitely had to lean on my support network a lot through that. Mm-hmm. And I actually ended up going on a hike with Alyssa. Hi, Alyssa. And we talked about, she introduced me to a different problem solving that is appreciative inquiry, where you focus on what is going well in your current life and how to nurture that and grow that. And that was huge. So at the time I was a server, and I knew that like I liked being a part of someone's day and making an impact on their life, big or small, and getting to interact with people. And through that, we started to, she actually mentioned Shopify. And a few months later, I ended up getting the job there, but that wasn't the first job I applied for, but it was in the same field. So yeah, that was my biggest lesson there. And nurturing all of that really led to where I am today. I owe a lot to that kind of perspective shift, and it definitely was not a linear path. And tracing it back, like, it was a few years in the making, this whole like path to where I am today, and wasn't able to recognize that until very recently. So listening to my body, definitely the number one. And for living with anxiety, like, I often get caught in negative thought loops or imposter syndrome, thinking I'm not good enough. And what's been really helpful for that is just rooting or like returning back to mindfulness to just get back into the present moment. So now if I catch myself going down a negative thought loop, I will just remind myself to be mindful in the moment and focus on my feet and like just grounding. And then even if I'm like doing the dishes, like I'll just be like, this is how, or I'm noticing how the sponge feels in my hand and how me moving my arm to wipe the plate feels. And doing that will allow me to just reconnect in the moment. And then once I'm grounded, I can ask myself, like, revisit those thoughts and ask if there's any action that can be taken in this current moment. Normally there isn't, so then I can let it be. And if there is something, for example, once I was nervous about an interview for a lead position at Shopify, and I was nervous because I wasn't sure that I was ready or like wanting to move up. I just was applying because cool opportunities present. I overcommit. So I applied. And the action that could come from me being anxious about that was to write down questions that I could ask in my interview to identify if I was ready. So I've been trying to do that. It's not always easy. It's definitely a practice, and lots of self-compassion along the way.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that shift to the appreciative inquiry, that mindfulness moment, right? Really just being in that present time is something that has made a huge impact for you. And I'm also 2 years sober. So when it comes to mental health, it's everyone has a different journey, but for me, it definitely helped in huge ways. And I want to give Steven the opportunity to share with us, if he's ready, what's the biggest lesson?
It's going to be a financial one. It always is. Counseling is really cheap.
Yeah.
It didn't feel cheap. It was like, the minimum is like $80 an hour. And I was like, you're out of your mind. And then I tried it.
Mm-hmm.
And holy crap, because every day is a little bit better, or sometimes a lot better than it was before, than it otherwise would have been.
Yeah.
That's easily been the thing. Hearing Brendan talk about like these little things, the way that they like add on to each other. It seems really clear in hindsight what happened. And you're like, yeah, of course, that was the path I was taking. But when you're looking at it from the other side, of course, you don't know how it's going to play out. And you're just like, do I believe in myself for like this moment? Like, is that crazy? Am I foolish? Again, Brene Brown, are you not good enough? Like, what's that thing? And you're like, well, let's just see what it feels like. And we'll do the thing. We'll take the action. And maybe it's bad. And you don't have to show anyone or tell anyone that you did it. But you can also just give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for reminding us of, it's you need help sometimes, right? There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And oftentimes saying things out loud and hearing yourself say them out loud is powerful. I think for me, the biggest lesson I've learned is really what privilege is. I consider myself the face of privilege in so many ways, where I lost my livelihood. I was in the psych ward. I had all of these papers and administration, and I needed to go into a program and medication, and I was able to advocate for myself. So I was able to fill out the paperwork. I had a printer. I had pens, right? I was able to apply for EI, to have money to get me through that. When I see homeless people, that could have been me without the resources and without the support system that I had. So I think that's the biggest thing I've learned, and that's what I think gives you another level of compassion when you've had a mental health crisis and you've come back from it, and realizing that more people than not don't get the opportunity to come back from it. So, just looking those people in the eye, giving them an encouraging word, realizing that the line between us and homelessness isn't always as big as it might seem. So to me, that's the biggest lesson I've learned, I think, from a societal perspective. So switching gears, we are talking about the workplace and mental health, and that's also a societal issue, right? We spend so much of our time at work. There have been many models we've heard: work-life balance, work-life integration, whole person enablement. There's a lot of jargon, and there's a lot of different waves of philosophy around the way we support people in the workplace. But Brendan, I'll go to you first. Do you have any suggestions for managers and how they can support employees, particularly in burnout or, when having a mental health problem?
Yeah, totally. I think that, first and foremost, it's important to remember that we are in the middle of a pandemic and a lot of people aren't doing well. And even if you don't feel necessarily very impacted, there's probably a good chance that you're supporting someone who has been impacted. And that can really take a toll on people. And I think it's important to create a space where it's safe for folks to share what they're going through. For myself, I've been able to share with my lead about what I've been going through and, the different challenges that I've been facing. And what was particularly nice of them on their part was that they were open to me sharing, even though it wasn't directly work related. It does provide an important context around where I am and what kind of challenges may be affecting certain behaviors or maybe playing into things. Not to say that's an excuse or anything, just it is important context to have to understand why someone may need a day off, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that to create a space where that's safe to happen, it's important to be vulnerable as well, so that you can create that trust and that relatedness with your staff. I also think it's really important to acknowledge that there's a lot of things going on in the world right now. I know that a lot of places may not want to or may want to steer clear of politics and everything. And while I don't think you need to state your opinion or get involved, I think it's important to recognize how it may affect others more than yourself and to share what resources you have. So similar to you mentioning about accessibility, like when you're going through it, whatever it looks like, you may not, if you have benefits and everything, you may not be able to access them because it could be too much work, even if it's just going to look through your contract or whatever to find the necessary information. So it's important to try and reduce those barriers if you can. And another thing that it's important to remember is sometimes people, when they share with you, they aren't looking for solutions. And I think that as managers, or just folks in general who care a lot, which I imagine many of us are since we're here today. But it's good to ask maybe if folks just want to vent or if they're looking for an opinion or anything. So don't need to always jump into solution mode. Sometimes people just want to feel heard. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have there. Oh, the other thing is just remember to, like Bojana mentioned at the beginning, I think it's important, especially in a digital space, to introduce trigger warnings when you're going to give a discussion that could have effects on someone's mental health. So while your intention may be to share vulnerably, if you're doing so without, a trigger warning, then it doesn't give people the choice to engage. Some people may not have the capacity, and doing that really honors everyone's boundaries. So I think that's an important thing to do as well.
Wow, yeah, so many good nuggets in there. Thank you. And it sounds kind of like, you really need that one support person. Like your lead is there, you're able to share with them. And that goes, ideally the whole team is open and vulnerable, but it's really, I think, a reminder to us all that we can be that one person for someone else, right? And I think taking it forward into the workplace and just being able to sit with people and, not pretending like emotions don't have a place because we can't deny them.
Totally. And just to add on there, so I was going through team lead interview process. I didn't get the role, but I did go through to the second interview. It got a lot of great feedback. Part of it was that they were very certain that I would be able to support people as like an individual, and people would always feel comfortable to share with me. But they wanted me to honor my own boundaries. And I think that's important for any manager, is that you can't be that one person for everyone, because that's probably way too much. It would be too much for me. So just recognizing or resorting to like being that person that's able to hear, but then also not trying to resolve all of the problems, like leveraging the resources that are available, whether it's benefits or team, like employee resource groups, whether something like that. Like for Shopify, we have different resource groups. Like there's an out network for queer employees, for example.
Awesome. Thanks for playing off that. Yeah, it's a good reminder. And thanks for sharing about your interview next time. And it's good to know that you're growing. And Steven, I'd love to hear from you as, a real leader in your organization, in your community. What do you think?
Gosh, I think a lot of stuff. I don't know if I think I'm a leader, but that I guess is technically true. Isn't that wild? That's pretty neat. I'd say the cool thing that I learned about sort of supporting folks when they are burning out is to kind of look at my own experience. I am fortunate to share the responsibility of operating the business with two other people who get it. So I often need them to be my eyes and ears. If they're like, oh, hey, like, are you good? Because you seem like if I was doing what you were doing right now, like I'd be pretty tired. You're like, oh, like, yeah, it has been a pretty heavy load for a little while. I didn't think about it. So sort of trying to be that for your employees, that early warning system of like, you're doing a lot from where I'm standing. Does it feel like you're doing a lot from where you